these pathways to connect with God, these what are like lifelines or IV, spiritual IV, if you want to think about it like that. The concept I want you to sort of hold on to with this, and that I want to hold on to with this, is that these are a means of attaching to God and being renewed in our orientation towards Him, to receive His grace in a way that is very intentional, right? Like, God is faithful, and when we have had our seasons of busyness or ignoring Him or rebellion even, or a kind of a hard heart, He's faithful, right? I just was reading again this morning that He will complete the work He started. I think it's in Philippians. And so He's faithful to us. I mean, He is holding on to us, but as a way, think about any other relationship, as we've talked about, these intentional connections, these intentional times, they expand the relationship. They anchor it deeper. They nourish it more. We can't, in any of our relationships, just not connect in that way and expect it to grow. So we're talking about prayer today, and I've set aside this week and next week to talk about prayer, but I have to tell you, I feel like that's even too small a time, or too short an amount of time to discuss something so rich and important and necessary. As I think about this and all of these disciplines, just as a reminder, we are not meant to sit in guilt over what we have been doing or have not been doing. Let's let go of guilt, because oftentimes what it does is it causes us to throw the towel in or stick our head in the sand or feel shame, and none of that is what the Lord wants. But I think it is meant to do two things. It is meant to inspire us to dive deeply into these practices, and prayer being one of them. And it is meant to also cause us in a healthy way to do some personal evaluation. So as I've been reading about this, I have been deeply convicted myself. I have been flippant and scattered and spontaneous in prayer, and there's nothing wrong with that being an aspect of my prayer life, but the intentionality with which I sit before the Lord, some of the ease with which I just ask Him for a lot of things and fail to listen to Him, or fail to sit in awe and worship Him and speak of who He is. There are habits of prayer that I think get sort of make a little pathway in our head, and we sort of just, it's how we relate to Him in prayer typically, and in a, just in a habit. It really is a habit that we just ask about the things that we need or are worried about. And in fact, as I was looking at Paul, I'm like, wow, he has set up a way, as did Jesus with the Lord's Prayer, but for us to consider, wait, what is the most important thing about prayer? What is the most important thing that Paul is actually praying for, which we'll talk about here. But I want to open with a little quote from Tim Keller, actually his wife. So this is this book here. Look, $3. Lots of good used bookstores around here, and I got this for $3. Let me tell you how much it normally is. $26.95. I'm sure you can get it in paperback now, cheaper. Everybody needs, listen, check Abe Books. It's where I get all my books, and a lot of times it's free shipping. Okay, anyway, he talks about how his wife came to him and said, and this was right around the time of 9/11, as you know, maybe he's a pastor in New York City, or was. I think he's retired now, and actually he's battling cancer, which makes me want to know how he's doing right now. But anyway, his wife came to him and said, I think we need to pray every night. I just think we need to pray together every night. And this is basically, he was diagnosed, this was years ago too, with thyroid cancer. And so his wife was coming to him And this is what she said. Imagine you were diagnosed with such a lethal condition that the doctor told you that you would die within hours unless you took a particular medicine. A pill every night before going to sleep. And imagine that you were told that you could never miss one dosage of it or you would die. Now, would you forget? Would you not get around to it at some point, some nights? No, it would be so crucial that you wouldn't forget it. You would never miss that dosage. Well, if we don't pray together to God, we're not going to make it because of all that we are facing. I'm certainly not. So we have to pray. We can't let it just slip from our hands. Now, I mean, this tells you not only something about her relationship with the Lord, but also something about their marriage, that this was going to turn into a really intentional priority. How many of us as couples, how many of us as families, besides just our meal, that we pray over our meal, which I will tell you for a season I stopped doing, merely because I felt it was so rote. I was not thinking about the fact that I was talking to the Lord. I was not really in my heart aware of the gift of my food. I wasn't thinking about it that way. It was such a habit that there was no real thought around me talking to the God of the universe. So for a period of time, I was like, I'm not going to pray before a meal because I need to rethink why I would pray before a meal and what I'm doing in prayer in general in my life. And so anyway, I love this because this picture of what was motivating her was powerful, and it was coming. His point is she was coming at it from the standpoint that prayer is necessary. It is not just like, oh, this is a nice little thing that we have access to. It was, in her mind, as she was coming to this conclusion, necessary. He talks about Flannery O'Connor in here, who is, she was a writer, interesting writer, excellent writer, well studied in the secular world, but she was a believer. She died young, lupus, I think. But she actually had a prayer journal, and it's been published. So I'm going to be getting on Abe to get that. Another book in the mail I'm going to have to hide from my husband. I feel like it's like drugs coming to my house. But anyway, she wrote this prayer journal, and she was kind of pointing out what she felt like were some of even the weak points of writing. And was it still, turning around? Was it becoming still about herself? And she was just really wrestling with prayer. And her desire, a deep desire, which this is also what Paul comes at his prayers with, the deep longing to know God. This real motivation to be aligned with, connected to, and at one with the Father, right? Like Christ was. This is what she writes in one of her journals. He has it here. I love that he's talking about Flannery O'Connor in here. He's very well read, which is part of what I love about his books. But she says, "Dear God, I cannot love thee the way I want to." I mean, how many of us just can acknowledge that at the very onset? I can't love you the way I want to. I don't love you the way I want to. You are the slim crescent of a moon that I see, and myself is the earth's shadow that keeps me from seeing all of the moon. What I am afraid of, dear God, is that my self shadow will grow so large that it blocks the whole moon, and that I will judge myself by the shadow that is nothing. I do not know you, God, because I am in the way. He goes on to talk about how, similar to Augustine, there is this desire for prayer, the desire for prayer is this. And he says this, that living well depended on the reordering of love. In her heart, in the heart of Augustine, I think you see it in you see it in Tozer, you see it in Hudson Taylor, you see it in Henry Nouwen, Amy Carmichael. I mean, the classics, you see it in Charles Spurgeon, that these people, Mother Teresa, there was this desire that in prayer, I need to and want to love you more. Now, if you and I go to bed at night and we look back on the day, and again, please hear me, this is not guilt, but I wonder how often, and I'm asking myself this question, is my prayer time, is my choosing to sit with the Father, not only meditating on his word and then praying his word, but is it coming from a desire to know him? It is not for me. It is not coming from that desire. And as Flannery O'Connor wrestles with prayer, this I invite you and I to do. Let's rethink. Let's push reset on our lives regarding prayer, our viewpoint of it, the way we see it and know it and understand it. If you look at, I was just kind of glancing through this, Ephesians 1, Philippians 1, and Colossians 1, these being three of Paul's letters, and how he opens those letters talking about what he's been praying for them, right? For those churches, what has he been praying for them? And every one of those letters repeats this same theme, that we would have knowledge and understanding of your will, that we would know, that you would know the Father. That's what he says, that you would know the Father, that you would understand the mysteries of his love, that our knowledge would grow in depth and breadth, right? And that this knowledge, I think this is actually Peter saying this, that this knowledge, this adding to our knowledge would, not become, that it would not become useless, that our faith and knowledge would not become useless. I mean, they warn you of this in seminary, that you can become so in your head. I think pastors struggle with it. Anybody who's studying the Word of God and teaching, whether in a school, university, or in a church, could struggle with this. Where I am merely looking at this as knowledge, but the truth is this knowledge of God is meant to lead to transformation. I am supposed to be changed. And so let me just read one passage to you from Romans chapter 8, looking at verses 15 and 16 again, with this kind of thought in mind. Let me back up. Verse 13, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons and daughters of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. But listen to this. But you have received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out to him, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. The reason this is so significant to me is because when you and I when our love for God is in its right place, this ordering of love, what is getting in the way? What do I love more than I love God? Where do I find that I am prioritizing and valuing something above him? When I practice communion with God through prayer, I am reminded of and reoriented back to my identity as a child of God. And the love of God that is committed and faithful to me, right? That the more I am assured of God's love, the more aligned I am with him, the more at peace I am with him as a result of believing that he loves me this way and that he is in fact faithful to me. And I cannot lose that love. Like a ship, Henry Nouwen talks about this, out at sea in the rough waves. If I am anchored into him, if I know him, if my time of prayer is returning to and knowing him and understanding him, I am more steady and less fragile. I am not so thrown by the circumstances in my life. And as you look at Paul, And as you read these, like I would encourage you this week, Ephesians 1, Philippians 1, Colossians 1, there are no appeals for a change of circumstance. He does not ask that. In his time of praying for these people, he is always praying this prayer, Lord, let us know you better. And it's not wrong to pray that these circumstances in our lives change. We are suffering in many ways down here. And as a matter of fact, this verse says this too. And if children, then we're heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him. So suffering is very much a part of our lives. Jesus himself asked God the Father to take the cross away. Please take this cup away from me. So there is nothing wrong with us asking for that. But if that becomes our sole motivation, or just like the habit of our prayers and what we talk to the Lord about, I think we will really miss the beauty of this communion with him. Do you understand why I can't probably do this in just 2? I might have to do all of month 7 on prayer. I can't imagine any of you would be like, oh no, we don't want that. I don't think any of you doing Rooted would want that. I'm going to close here because I'm trying to keep these a little shorter, people. Prayer is the only, this is again Keller, prayer is the only entryway into genuine self-knowledge. Sit with that this week. Self-knowledge. I cannot know myself unless I'm looking in the mirror of who God has defined me and imprinted himself on me. It is also the main way we experience deep change, the reordering of loves. Prayer is how God gives us so many of the unimaginable things he has for us, often the things we don't ask for. Indeed, prayer makes it safe for God to give as many of the things we most desire. It is the way we know God, the way we finally treat God as God. Prayer is simply the key to everything we need to do and be in life. We must learn to pray. We have to. So I encourage you this week as you sit with some of this, and you have a PDF here to sit with some of these questions, but I would encourage you to make intentional time to be with God, to reorder your love for him. And I want to do the same. So have a good week, ladies.